one, the mystery of Todd Gurley's value, and this was the first thing that jumped out at anybody. And one of the things that jumped out was that I feel like the first two picks in the draft were not your first two picks. I feel like the first two picks that you had on your big board actually went 3-4.
You're right.
I was 4, and I think I got Alvin Kamara with the 4th pick, which I
my number 2 guy. Yeah, and then Zeke was number 3, who's my number 1 guy. So.
It was jizzing all over the place getting Zeke 3, and I was pretty happy getting Kamara 4. So anyway, that was a bit off script. Heavy running backs in the first round. We're going to talk about that later. But the big mystery, Todd Gurley's value, you actually snagged Gurley early second round.
Yeah.
You're pretty excited about it. I mean, if you hadn't taken him, I would have, but I wasn't picking for several picks after you. Man, talk about a guy that has consistently put up amazing numbers. Going to 15, I don't know. I mean, were you really smart or were you really stupid? Sell me on why you were really smart.
I mean, everybody, that was probably the most bashed pick. It happened at 15 overall. I got destroyed for it. I was like, you guys fucking kidding me? Because, I mean, I forgot Gurley was even sitting out there, and I picked DeAndre Hopkins at 10 overall. I was like, all right, nice, safe wide receiver. And then I saw Gurley was still sitting there, and I started slapping myself. I was like, fuck, I missed Gurley at 10? Like, that's ridiculous. And then he comes all the way back around at 15, and I was like, am I missing something? What's going on here? And I mean, the common perception about Gurley these days has just murdered his fantasy value. This is a guy who, for back-to-back seasons, the first time in fantasy football history that a running back has gone back-to-back and led the position, led all skill positions in fantasy points with 342 points, 24.5 per game last year. He led it with only 14 games played. The year before that, he scored 350, has just gone back-to-back ridiculous stats, and now is falling to round 2. It's one of those situations where everything coming out about him has been bad, and it's all warranted. We're going to talk about the red flags as I get further down into this, but that's one of those things where there's only bad stuff coming out, that recency bias. I need to remind you guys of how good this motherfucker has been for these last 2 years. He's been a title winner for 2 straight seasons, and everyone's acting like he's done. He had a little arthritis in his knee, so his career is over. Like, let's get over that now. I mean, talk about consistency. He was above 22 points in 12 of 14 games. 22, not like 10. I'm not talking about double digits. I'm talking about 22 fantasy points in 12 of 14 games. He only has gone under double-digit fantasy points twice in the last 2 years. 27 of 29 games, he's been above double digits. He had over 30 points in half of those 14 games. 7 of 14, he was above 30. So, I mean, just want to remind you of how good this guy was, how many leagues he was winning people last season. Before, again, we're going to get to these red flags. A lot of this, though, came because of the TDs. He's been an absolute machine, scoring 21 and 19 TDs over his last 2 seasons, over 1.5 per game nearly. So, I mean, the guy's been ridiculous, and I don't see that role necessarily changing. That's what's made him such an efficient monster in fantasy. Why would you take Gurley, one of the best battering rams and goal line backs, out at the stripe where this offense lives? So, I mean, that's the one thing I'm really clinging to is even if I'm going to talk about the red flags. I keep saying that. We're going to get to all those. But even when that's all said and done, I still think this guy's getting almost all of the goal line work, and he's still going to be a great candidate for 15-plus touchdowns, which will keep him highly efficient. Now, of course, if everything was exactly the same, there's no way this guy that scored over 340 fantasy points in back-to-back seasons would be falling outside of the top 3, never mind, the first round. So there are some red flags. One is the knee. I mentioned arthritis in the knee. All these sketchy reports. He fell behind the blubber ball, fucking C.J. Anderson, for a stretch run last year. Like, if Gurley's fully healthy, would C.J. Anderson's fat ass ever even be a person in the league? No. So, yes, that was a concern. What happened last year, we still don't even know. He's been, Sean McVay's been so unforthcoming, whatever the opposite word is, about the details. So we have no idea what the truth is. But still, it's like, I mean, we knew he had knee concerns coming out of college. He had the ACL surgery. Anyone that has ACL surgery or any type of surgery is going to be developing a little bit of arthritis in the knee. So it's not like this is a new development. We all knew this. His trainer came out and said we all knew he was going to have arthritis. He had an ACL surgery. That's the case for anybody that's going through this surgery. He said that 5-year mark. So yeah, maybe they're going to tone it down a little bit because of the knees. But I don't see this unless he starts missing training camp and we see him on crutches again or something like that. I'm not overly concerned. I think he's had a full off season. He's had bigger knee surgeries. I think that's getting overblown. The second thing is the usage. Yes, they've hyped up. We're going to have a Batman Robin situation. There's got to be a 1B to his 1A. They go out and take Darrell Henderson, who's our draft day takeaway number 2. So I'm going to save the talk on him. They go out and get Darrell Henderson. So yes, there's going to be a usage hit. I get this. They're already Ian Rappaport coming out and said the days of him being the every down bell cow straight up are definitely over. It's probably not going to be like that, which is why the Rams went up and got Henderson. So I get that. 343 touches 2 years ago, 315 last year. That's a lot of work for this guy. But because he's scoring over 1 point per touch, even let's say he takes 50 of those away, maybe even 70 of those away, and he gets hit to, the 260, 270 range for Todd Gurley, that which would have been below Jordan Howard, Chris Carson, Peyton Barber territory last year. So let's say he falls. Your boy Peyton, we'll talk about, I'm sure at some point. But let's say that's his measuring stick, like 260 Peyton Barber range of touches. If he still maintains that efficiency, which I do think is possible when he scores as many touchdowns as he does, and touchdowns are fluky year to year. I get that, but not for a guy in this offense.
They're fluky, but you're talking about an explosive offense and a guy that is going to get the carries. Like when it counts. So exactly. I don't really consider, carries inside the 5, like for a, team with tons of options and a great back to be fluky somehow.
When you convert them as well as he does.
47-yard
right.
bombs are fluky.
Exactly. So, let's say he maintains right around that point per touch. He's still topping, if he maintains what he had last year, right around 300 fantasy points. That still would have been the RB4 last year, behind only Saquon, C-Mac, and AK-47, Alvin Kamara. So he would have scored more than Zeke, even with 60 less touches at that efficiency rate. So, yes, he's going to lighten the load. Yes, there's some knee concerns. But to me, the only concern I am a little bit nervous about truly is the line. Yeah, he lost the interior of the line, the left guard Saffold, Jason Sullivan, 2 key interior pieces, but it's a zone blocking scheme. You can get an athletic guy in there and it's kind of just churn it out. We've seen it with Shanahan, so I'm not even that worried about that. So you boil all that down and all these red flags, they exist, but I think they're so overblown because we cling to when there's this negative perception. We need a reason to devalue someone because it's so easy to get hyped up and this guy's going to explode, this guy's going to explode. You need your guy that you're going to say is going to suck. And he's everyone's bust candidate now, and I think it's making this guy that's been such a monster a tremendous value, and I think it's well worth the risk. Either way, there is risk, but I think it's well worth it to me.
Do you want to know something that I've speculated about on this? I agree. I hear what you're saying. We want to be able to call someone out as the bust and everything like that. I feel like there's been there's gasoline on this fire for 2 reasons. One is pretty obvious, which is the very public way that he kind of fell on his face at the end of the year. And I don't mean he just didn't do well. They actively were not using him in the most important game or games of the year. Absolutely. So extremely public. We saw that happen. Now, granted, that wouldn't actually affect his fantasy numbers in the season, but everybody saw that. That's one thing. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. The second thing, and this is weird because it's completely an apples and oranges argument, but I think it applies. I feel like people are gun shy with Gurley more so because of seeing people get burned on Le'Veon Bell last year, which was for a completely different reason. I don't think, the guy was pretty much as money as you can get, consistent as you can get in the Gurley category, in some ways maybe even more. And, so people didn't think twice about taking this guy with a top 2, top 3, top 4 pick last year. And then everybody got to see also very publicly all those people's seasons completely ruined. And so I think that people, even though, that was different. It was free agency. This is injury, potential platoon in the backfield. But I think that this is actually going to play a factor in people picking him or not picking him, as stupid as that is. I think that everybody wants to make sure they're getting something real with that pick. You get a number 3 pick, a number 4 pick, 5, 6, 7. You want to make sure you're putting money in the bank with that. Yeah. And everybody that took Le'Veon Bell last year thought they were, for sure. I certainly I didn't take him, but I certainly didn't think he was a bad pick. I figured he'd be back after a week. Nobody wants to be the guy who took somebody and got jack shit for him. Yeah. And so I think that even though Gurley's value is clearly higher, where the people in the RSJ draft had him going, I think that's what's playing into it. Nobody wants to end up with nothing, with a bag of magic beans, Well,
his ECR, you say that, but no, his ECR is lower than when I took him. He's going right around 17 by the experts. He's going at 15 in ADP right where I got him. So you're right. There's all these things.
That's why, though?
I think 100% the public display of how, ineptitude he was used down the stretch. Yeah, that's a big part of it. And I think there is some more, you can't win your fantasy league in the first round, but you certainly can lose it if you lose out on your main guy. There's that whole perception, which is very fair too. So yes, I think both of those things have certainly factored in. There's just so much recency bias. I think everyone's forgetting just how good of a player Todd Gurley is, how good he's been for 2 straight seasons. And I don't think all that much has changed. There's definitely a little more risk due to the knee. There's a little bit more usage concerns because they draft Henderson. They've already said they're going to lighten the load. Like, I get both of those things. But when his individual talent is still as good as can be, when his surrounding talent is probably the best in the league in terms of explosive offense and points, and the scheme is just so running back centric, even if he's losing a couple more series a game, when he's in there, he's going to be getting tons of receptions, tons of carries. Everything just boils down to such a great fantasy value that everyone's erased that and only zoomed in on the negatives right now. And it's making somebody I think should be a top 6 or 7 guy fall to round 2, and I'm all about that value.